I understood that reference. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 60 of Movies Are Awesome, the show all about lawn gnomes. My name is Nathan Pottle, and thank you for joining me today. It's episode 60, so 6-0, that's kind of a landmark, so I wanted to do something special and fun for today's episode. So what I did is on the Instagram page for the show, if you follow the show, you may or may not have seen it. I did a poll online of what movie to do a movie review for, of a classic. I wanted to do a movie that was older, a movie that was influential, and even though they were both movies that have been talked about again and again and again and again, you can find all kinds of information about these movies online. I wanted to give my perspective on these films, and so I gave the option of either The Wizard of Oz or Citizen Kane, and you could vote between which one you wanted to watch, and The Wizard of Oz won. I do believe it was like 79% to 21% in favor of The Wizard of Oz over Citizen Kane. So here I am talking about it. I rewatched it just this morning, so it's fresh in my mind. I made some notes as I was watching. I didn't quite have as much time to sit down and really elaborate and delve deep into my notes, but I'm surprisingly busy today. I just have things going on, and I gotta get recording right now if I'm gonna get everything done today that I need to. So I'm just going to get into my review here of The Wizard of Oz. Alright, so The Wizard of Oz was directed by Victor Fleming. It was released in 1939. It was shot in a 4:3 aspect ratio, and I watched it in 5.1 digital surround sound, if that information is valuable to you or not. And if those kind of terms and that kind of technical specs don't matter to you, that's fine. I really like knowing what the aspect ratio is and what year things came out and who was the director. Judy Garland is obviously the star of this film, and it's about a young girl named Dorothy, played by Judy Garland, who gets swept up in a tornado and is dropped in the land of Oz, where in order for her to find her way back home to Kansas, she goes on a journey and meets some friends along the way to find the Wizard of Oz, who will grant her her wish and send her back home. Now, obviously, this movie is very, very old. It's been around for a long time. I do believe last year was the 80th anniversary of The Wizard of Oz. I can't do math in my head quick right now. I think 81 years this movie is old now. And isn't that crazy that it's such an old film, but yet so influential and has so many things going on? So I kind of want to walk through the movie, the events of the film, and just kind of talk about what I think about things and how I think things work, and certain things maybe don't work so much. And so it's not going to be just me talking for half an hour about how amazing this movie is and how much I love it. I want to get in underneath the surface a little bit and talk about things that are structured in a certain way that help us go with Dorothy on her journey and how we understand how she's feeling at the end. Right at the beginning of the movie is in black and white. It's got sepia tones. It's more like brown and white as opposed to the classic black and white. So it feels a little more drab and just a little more boring, you know? My wife actually enjoys the sepia tones more than regular black and white, so she made that comment when we were watching the movie this morning, and I thought that was interesting, even though the sepia tones is meant to kind of suck the joy out of things, because it's like brown is a gross color. I think in most respects that when you see the color brown, it's maybe kind of gross, right? That's what it's meant to be, I think. So you start out with the movie in black and white, and Dorothy, her life in Kansas, she lives on the farm with her Auntie Em and Uncle whoever. I don't remember his name. I didn't write it down. But basically, she's just living on the farm, and her life sucks. At least according to her life sucks. She doesn't like living on the farm. She doesn't like the mean old lady who lives down the street. She doesn't like all of these things, and she's kind of a dreamer. She's that Luke Skywalker type character who is stuck in this mundane existence and wants more out of life. And if she could only get out of where she is, the place that's holding her back, she could live a great life and have a fantastic adventure and just be the person who she's supposed to be and find some kind of meaning if she could only just escape. And there are a lot of things going on in the opening minutes of this movie that really help establish this, where she is trying to speak with her aunt and some of the farmhands about something that happened to her that she thinks is very important, that the next door neighbor, I can't remember her name, she is after her dog Toto. And Dorothy doesn't want to give up Toto, and she's trying to speak with everybody on the farm, but they're busy doing work. They have jobs to do. They have stuff they need to get done, and they just don't have time for Dorothy's nonsense, and they keep putting her off, and they say, like, hey, I have this work I need to do, like, kind of leave me alone. And Dorothy kind of looks at them like she doesn't care what they have to do. What they have to do is not very important. She doesn't do any farm work from what I understand or from how I see things. So what does she care? She's just a young girl who wants to do what she wants to do and have people listen to her when she wants to talk about it. So when she's going around, and there's a part in the opening of the movie too where she's walking on a fence. She's like balancing on the upper beam, and then she falls in among the pigs. And Auntie Em is like, oh, get Dorothy away from there. Like, being around the pigs is no place for a little girl. And just kind of like brushes her off, right? Because she's just a little girl. She doesn't know things. She's just little. And then it's kind of after that the next door neighbor, she comes back and declares that the dog needs to be put down, and she's going to put the dog in a basket and take it away because she went to the law and she has some kind of documentation that allows her to take the dog in order for it to be put down because it bit her. And this is the end of the world for Dorothy. She thinks it's just like horrible and awful. And I know a lot of people out there are really attached to their pets, and if their dogs or whatever get put down, it makes them very sad. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't feel that way or whatever. I personally am not attached to animals in that way. So for me, I have a bit of a disconnect there, but that doesn't matter too much at all. And then the dog Toto escapes from the basket because I guess it doesn't have a locking mechanism and runs back to Dorothy. And her first thought is that in order to keep the dog safe and alive, she needs to run away from home. So she packs up all her things and off she goes. And then she comes across a man who is a fortune teller. And he has like a wagon, and he's like traveling across the country, and he has a fork tied to a stick that he's then using to cook his hot dog over a fire. I thought that was very funny. I noticed it today when we were watching it, that it's not like your classic wiener roasting stick that you use around a fire. It's literally just this stick with a fork taped onto it, and then he sticks the hot dog onto a fork and holds it over the fire. I found that really amusing. But this guy reads her future and basically tells her that she needs to go back home because her aunt is going to be really, really worried about her. And he just scams her. Like, he tells her to close her eyes, and then he goes through her things, and like that's where he gets his information. He's like, oh, you're a runaway from home, and you need to go back to your aunt because everything is awful without you there. And that's really important to remember, that this fortune teller guy is kind of a phony and a fake, because it comes full circle a little bit later. And if you've seen the movie, that's why. I should also point out, by the way, I'm talking full spoilers about an 81-year-old movie. So if you have not seen The Wizard of Oz, I've only talked about the opening parts of the movie right now, so I'm not very deep into it yet. So if you are wanting, like, stop the video now, go watch The Wizard of Oz, you can come back, we can have a discussion about it. I don't know what streaming services or where The Wizard of Oz is available. I've got it on Blu-ray, so I can't help you there on where to find it. But if you, for whatever reason, have not seen The Wizard of Oz, for one, I highly recommend it because it's amazing. I love it. And then number 2, you should watch it because I'm going to be talking about all the things that happens in this movie. But to go back, Dorothy takes the advice of the fortune teller. She goes back home, And just as she's getting home is when a tornado is hitting the farm. Now, everyone else on the farm has already retreated into the cellar where you're safe from the tornado, and Dorothy is trying to get in, but it's locked, and they can't hear her banging on the door because it's so loud outside from the tornado. So she runs into the house for safety, and the house gets picked up by the tornado, and she gets struck on the head. Now, this is where things start to happen. As soon as she gets hit on the head and she wakes back up, when she wakes up and looks out the window, there are things flying outside her window, and she sees her evil neighbor, and she's riding her bike in a tornado up in the air, but then she turns, and instead of a woman riding a bike, she's now a witch with green skin and black clothes and a pointy hat, and she's riding on a broomstick, and she looks in the window and she cackles and laughs at Dorothy and flies away. And this is when things start to become kind of fantastical and crazy, you know? And then it's when the tornado is done with the house and flings it out that the house lands. And then when she leaves, she is in the land of Oz. And so it takes about 15 minutes of the movie or so before we are in the land of Oz. And as soon as she leaves the house and goes out into the land of Oz, then we're in a world of color. And I think that it's just fantastic. The way this shot is beautiful, from Dorothy standing inside, and we're behind Dorothy. She opens the door, and you can see outside is color and inside is black and white, and she goes out through the door and into the world of color. And so Oz is meant to represent all of her hopes and dreams, everything that she's ever wanted. She's not trapped on the farm anymore. She's out in the world and she's experiencing all of these things, and it's giving color to life, literally making things brighter and happier for her, because this is what she wanted. Before we get too far deep into the land of Oz and what Dorothy does there, I want to point out one thing really quick. The way this script is written, scripts just aren't written this way anymore. There's a lot of really snappy dialogue, and the way that they reveal information and it just has a classic feel to it, and movies just aren't written that way anymore. And maybe that's for the better, maybe that's for the worse, but I really like the nostalgic feeling that I have listening to the way these people speak and the way that their sentences are structured, as to both reveal information to us, as to also make us laugh and chuckle. There's a part a little bit later when Dorothy meets the Scarecrow, and he says he doesn't have a brain, and she says, well, how can you talk if you don't have a brain? And the Scarecrow scratches his head and he says, well, I don't know, but I think there are an awful lot of people out there who do a lot of talking and don't have any brains. And so just things like that, it's particularly clever, and I enjoy it quite a bit. And I just wanted to quickly comment that the way the movie is written, I think, is really lovely and spectacular. But Dorothy now is in the land of Oz, and she is greeted by the Good Witch of the North. And she comes flying in on a bubble, and the bubble is small, and then it grows big, and then she emerges from the bubble, the Good Witch of the North. And she approaches Dorothy, and they have a little bit of dialogue, and then Dorothy learns that her house landed on the Wicked Witch of the East. So I guess whether you're a good or bad witch depends on direction. I think good witches are north and south, and bad witches are east and west. So Dorothy accidentally killed the Wicked Witch of the East by dropping her house on her, and you can see her feet sticking out from underneath the house, and she's got these shiny red shoes on and black and white striped leggings, or whatever you want to call them. And then that's when the Munchkins emerge, and the Munchkins welcome Dorothy as their savior, and they are singing ding dong, the witch is dead. And don't worry, I have made an entire list. I have a separate sheet of paper just for all of the different things that are now very often referenced in pop culture because of this movie. I have a whole separate sheet of paper just for that, so I will share those things when I get to the end if I remember, or maybe if I feel I've talked too long, maybe I'll just stop. Who knows? I have all the time in the world. I'm not constrained to anything. I do what I want. But anyway, the Munchkins are these little people who are just cute and adorable, and they live in Munchkinland in the Land of Oz, and they sing a song, and it is just, I love their song of like welcoming Dorothy. And there's a part where they're singing about whether the Wicked Witch is actually dead or not, and the coroner comes up and he sings about how he examined the body, and she is not merely dead, she is most sincerely dead, are the lyrics to the song. And I think it's very, very funny. I was laughing a lot during that song. And then, of course, you have the Lollipop Guild, which is very well known, and they give her a giant lollipop, and they're giving her all these gifts, and the mayor is welcoming her, and they just hail Dorothy as her savior. Now, what I notice about the Munchkins is that because they're small and they're innocent, and that is very representative of Dorothy's innocence. And as she leaves Munchkinland and like goes on her journey, she leaves innocence behind, and she becomes smarter, and she understands more of the world, and she comes to a realization at the end of the movie about all of these things that she's been through, and she like makes a discovery about herself. I wouldn't exactly call it a coming of age story, but at the same time it kind of is, because Dorothy is supposed to be very young, even though Judy Garland doesn't look as young as maybe Dorothy is supposed to be. But I guess I'll still, it has coming of age elements to the story, so we'll go with it for now. But anyway, Dorothy discovers that she cannot just go home. She needs the help of the Wizard of Oz. And then obviously that is when she learns she needs to follow the Yellow Brick Road, because she is not a witch and cannot fly there because she forgot her broomstick at home. So off Dorothy goes, and she follows the Yellow Brick Road, and she comes across some different people along the way. She meets the Scarecrow, who wishes he had a brain, and so he comes along the journey. And then she meets the Tin Man, who wishes he had a heart, and he comes along the journey. And then she meets the Cowardly Lion, who wishes he had more courage. And then he gets to come along the journey to Oz as well, to Emerald City, to meet the Wizard of Oz. One thing I would like to point out is that these 3 sequences of meeting these people are very formulaic, and they're almost exactly the same. She walks into the scene, she comes across the person, they have a conversation, they sing a song, she lets them go with them, and then they move on. That's very structured on how that works. When we get to the Cowardly Lion, he does sing a song, but it's very, very short, and then everyone else starts singing with him right away. And so then the Cowardly Lion gets another song a little later in the movie, because his first song he got shortchanged on. So, and like that's just like the structure of how this goes. And then we see it paralleled a little later near the end of the movie with this same structure of, I want this, give me this, and then when they meet the Wizard of Oz at the end of the movie. But I'll get there. One thing that does happen outside of this pattern, though, is that right before they meet the Tin Man, Dorothy and the Scarecrow come across these trees, and they start pulling apples out of the trees, and the apple slaps Dorothy on the hand, and these trees are yelling at Dorothy, and they're mad because they're like, how would you like it if I pulled something off of you? And then the Scarecrow taunts them, and they throw apples at them, and then that's how they get apples and they get to eat. Now, when I was a child, watching that scene was terrifying. I thought those trees were just some of the scariest things ever. The trees and also the flying monkeys. And we haven't gotten there yet, but I will get there, don't worry. But these trees just, they just looked so real, and they felt so scary. And that's one testament to this film, is that the costuming is fantastic. I think the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, Cowardly Lion, the trees, I think they all look fantastic. Now, I think that the Munchkins and also the inhabitants of Emerald City do look a little bit strange in just like the choices that they made, with like their hair really slicked and greased to the sides of their head, and the way that their hairdos are. I think it looks a little bit strange, but overall, I think the costuming and the set design is just beautiful in this movie, and it's crazy. And you can look up, there are stories about like how everything was made in this movie and all of the different processes. One quick story that I'm going to share is that the guy who played the Tin Man, the paint that they put on his face, the silver paint, was like full of mercury or some kind of chemical that made the actor really, really sick. And he was able to brave through it, and it made his skin big rashes and really irritable, and it was really an awful experience for him, but he pushed through, and I'm glad that he did, because he did a fantastic job. The Tin Man is just really, really charming. And then, of course, we have the scene where they go through the poppies, and the Wicked Witch of the West has poisoned the poppies to make Dorothy fall asleep so that she doesn't make it to the Wizard of Oz, because she wants Dorothy to die so that she can get the ruby slippers, because they're very powerful and very magical. And I've seen those memes on the internet where people are like, oh, the Wizard of Oz is just about women fighting over shoes. And yeah, that's very funny. Haha, it's great. But this movie has a lot more merit than that, and I think it deserves more than that kind of treatment, right? So I don't know. But they have this scene in the poppies, and I don't know the exact function or if this scene represents anything or if it like has any kind of meaning, because they get to the poppies and they fall asleep, and then almost immediately the Good Witch of the North causes it to snow, and the problem is solved. Like, it's nothing from what they do or nothing that they have to overcome, just like the Good Witch of the North swoops in and saves them almost immediately. So like, nothing really bad happens, and I feel like that scene probably could have been cut out, but this movie's only an hour 40 anyway, so like it doesn't have a huge bearing on the story, but also at the same time you gotta have the Wicked Witch of the West doing something. But they get past that poppy, they get to the Emerald City, and they have a little confrontation with the guy at the door. Now the guy who's at the door of Emerald City, now this actor, he plays 5 different roles in this movie. He plays the what am I talking about here? He plays the fortune teller in Kansas. He plays the guy at the front gate of Emerald City. He plays the carriage driver in Emerald City. He plays the guard to Oz in Emerald City, and then he plays, of course, the Wizard of Oz himself. And so he gets the most roles. He keeps popping up, and he's a very jolly man. Whenever he's on screen, I'm smiling because I like that guy. I find him very charismatic. And then there's this whole sequence in Emerald City once they get there about like polishing up everybody and making them all clean and ready to see the Wizard of Oz. And I don't really like this scene that much. I don't like the song that they sing. It's one of the parts of the movie that doesn't quite work for me. And then immediately after they do all of this preparation to see the Wizard of Oz, they are denied access by the guard. So, like, all that getting ready and stuff, if they knew no one is allowed to go see the wizard, why would they help them get all pretty and ready to go see the wizard? That doesn't quite make sense. But in any case, it's at that moment in time when the Wicked Witch of the West flies over Emerald City, and she does some skywriting, and she says, "Surrender, Dorothy." And so everyone in Emerald City is really scared. They feel like they're going to be attacked by the Wicked Witch if they don't give Dorothy up. And then that's when they're granted access to go see the wizard. And it's in part because of the sympathy of the guard. So they go in to see Oz, and the Wizard of Oz is very scary, and he looks just nuts. And now's probably a really good time to comment on just the visual effects for this movie in general. I think are really good. Obviously, it came out 80 years ago, so I got to give it a little bit of slack. Some of the stuff looks really fake and not very good. There's a scene a little bit later when they're in the haunted forest, and there's like birds with glowing eyes, and that's what looks the most fake in the entire movie. A lot of the visual effects seem to have been done in camera, and so that way they look really, really good, especially with the Wicked Witch flying away or disappearing into the floor. Like, I think it's done very smoothly and very seamlessly. So I actually like the visual effects of this movie quite a bit, and especially with Oz and his flames, and he's got a big projected head up in the air. It's all over the place. But basically the wizard says, "I will give you everything that you guys want if you bring me the broomstick of the Wicked Witch of the West." which maybe is an impossible task, maybe it's not. They won't know. And so basically, it's implied that they have to go kill the witch and bring the broom back in order to get the things that they want from the wizard, which is Dorothy wants to be sent home, Scarecrow wants a brain, Tin Man wants a heart, and the lion wants courage. So off they go on this adventure. They're in the haunted forest where we see the fake birds, but then we get the Fly My Pretties and the very scary monkeys with wings swoop in, and they kidnap Dorothy and they take her to the Wicked Witch's castle. Now, I don't know exactly why they needed to do this, because they were on their way to the castle anyway, but I guess it separates Dorothy, however, from everyone else in the main party, and so I think that's maybe why she felt it needed to be done. And it's after this that we get a really good scene, and it's maybe one of the better scenes of the entire film. So Dorothy is left locked up in a room, and the Wicked Witch of the West says, like, I'm going to kill you when this timer runs out. And she turns an hourglass over and she says, like, once this time is up, you're going to die, and then I'm going to take the shoes. And Dorothy is left crying. And she's in this room by herself, and she's sitting next to this giant crystal ball. And then her Auntie M shows up in the crystal ball, and you see her looking around, like, trying to find Dorothy, and she's calling out, like, Dorothy, Dorothy, where are you? And Dorothy is trying to speak through the crystal ball to Auntie M, and it's at this point in the movie where Dorothy has really hit rock bottom, and she's realizing, like, maybe going out into the world isn't all it's cracked up to be. There's a lot of dangers out here. There's a lot of things that I had no idea about just because I'm so young and naive and haven't really learned things yet. And she's trying to reconnect with her aunt, but then the image changes and Auntie M goes away and the Wicked Witch of the West replaces her. And the Wicked Witch is just taunting Dorothy and going like, oh, Auntie M, ha ha. And then she like cackles, and she does that very famous witch's cackle that I will not even try to duplicate because there's just not even a chance. And I really like this scene, and I think it's absolutely necessary to the film and specifically to Dorothy's journey that we see her in this place of complete vulnerability. And seeing her in this place of vulnerability helps us to not only sympathize with her, but then when her story comes full circle at the end of the film and she has had a complete story arc, then we completely understand where she started and how she got to where she is at the end. And I think that without this scene in the film, it would not work as well. So then we have Toto saving the day. He runs away from the castle because Dorothy had him. He runs away from the castle and finds the lion, the scarecrow, and the Tin Man and leads them back to the castle in order to save Dorothy. And then they infiltrate the castle, they rescue Dorothy, and Dorothy accidentally splashes water onto the Wicked Witch of the West. And then this causes her to melt and die. And they have saved everyone. She's killed 2 witches, and like, good for her. That's pretty good. She's 2 for 2. And then they take the broom and they go back to Emerald City to present the broom to the Wizard of Oz. Now, I want to point out just one thing really quick, that when Dorothy presents the broom to the Wizard of Oz, she gives a little curtsy, and just the way she does it, I think it's adorable. It's just a cute little curtsy, and then she presents the broom. And the Wizard of Oz doesn't want to pay up. He's like, no, forget it. Come back tomorrow, and then I'll give you your stuff. And they're looking at him saying like, hey, no, we did our end of the bargain. Now you gotta pay up. And then it is when Toto saves the day again. And he's actually like, Toto actually saves the day quite a bit in this movie, where he pulls the curtain aside, and behind the curtain you see a little man who is pushing buttons and speaking into a microphone, kind of like I'm doing right now, and like speaking the same words that Oz, like in the Flames, is speaking. And then he says that classic line, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And then they go over and he reveals that even though he is a good man, he is a bad wizard. But he is still able to give them what they wanted. And basically, for the most part, it's giving them what they've had inside them all along, which maybe sounds really cliched nowadays, but at the time, I don't think it was. So the Wizard of Oz points out to the Scarecrow that he's actually quite intelligent, and throughout the entire movie, like, he comes up with all the plans and he has all the ideas on how to escape. And it's very evident throughout the film that the Scarecrow is not stupid. He has a brain. But he is then presented with what does he give him? A degree, a diploma? And then the Scarecrow is like, yay, it's proven that I'm smart, and he gives the Tin Man a clock in the shape of a heart so that it can tick for him, and then he gives the Lion a Medal of Honor that says courage on it, and it makes them feel better. But Dorothy, the thing that she wants from the wizard is not something that was inside her all along. She wants to go home. Now, that realization that she wants to go home is part of her journey, and it's integral, and it's outside of the formula. Like earlier when I said the formula of meeting the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion, they're all very much the same. This formula comes again at the end when the wizard is giving them each of their gifts. The way that he words his sentences and then presents a gift to them is almost exactly the same for each one of them. So it's following that same formula. It all fits and works together. But when it comes to Dorothy, he has to actually take her back to Kansas himself. And he's from Kansas. How about that? So he's got a hot air balloon and he's going to take Dorothy home, and it's going to be great. So they have this whole ceremony to fly back home, and Dorothy misses the boat. She has to get out of the hot air balloon because Toto ran away because she chased a cat. But the hot air balloon went up into the sky without her and left her behind. So now she's stranded in Oz and she'll never get home. But wait, there's more. The Wicked Witch of the North comes back and she talks to Dorothy and she says, hey, you can go back home because you're wearing magic shoes. And the Scarecrow says, why didn't she, if she could have gone home this whole time, why didn't you just tell her then? And she says, well, I couldn't have because Dorothy wouldn't have believed me. She would have had to discover for herself. And the lesson that Dorothy learns, and she describes it very eloquently, but it's basically home is where the heart is, and she realizes the importance of staying at home and knowing that everything that she needed and everything she wanted, she already had. It just took it being taken away from her in order for her to realize it. And then so it's with that realization that we come to a complete and full story arc. The world is not all it's cracked up to be. It's not just all sunshine and rainbows. There's a lot of bad things out there, and staying at home maybe is not such a bad idea. I like staying at home. I think being at home is great. That's where I watch movies. So Dorothy gets to click her shoes together, her heels together 3 times, and she says there's no place like home, and she is returned. And then that's when she has conversations with everyone on the farm and says they're you were there and you were there and you were there, because all of the main characters in Oz, the Scarecrow, Tin Man, the Lion, the Wizard, and the Wicked Witch of the West, they all have Kansas counterparts because this whole thing in Oz took place inside Dorothy's head. She didn't actually go there. During the tornado, when she got hit on the head, she just imagined all of this. And so she went on this journey for herself inside her mind and came to this realization that there truly is no place like home. And then they have a nice conversation and that, and then that's the final line of the film of there's no place like home, and it fades to the title card and says the end and it's over. And I watched this movie pretty much with a big smile on my face almost the entire time, just because it's so good. There's all of these different things to it. There's little tiny jokes here and there that just add extra flavor to the movie. When they first get to Emerald City, the gatekeeper says oh, this is a horse of a different color. And every time the horse appears on screen, it's a different color. I think he's white and then purple and then an orangey yellow, and then I think he's green one time. But every time you see the horse, he's a horse of a different color because he is constantly changing. Overall, I think this movie is fantastic. It's wonderful. It's in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. If you listened to that episode, that was episode 50, already 10 episodes ago. That's crazy. But the one thing I like least about this movie is probably the Cowardly Lion. I think that he gets a little bit annoying and grating at times, like the sounds that he makes and the little accenty voice that he does for himself. I don't think it 100% works. I'm not a fan of his song that when he's king of the forest. And that's just a very minor thing, right? That it doesn't take up a lot of screen time. It's just one minor blip in an otherwise phenomenal film. Now, I do have my list of pop culture things here, so a lot of things in this movie are now used very often as it's referenced all the time inside these movies here. So when Dorothy is singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, that song is used all over the place. It's maybe not used with the same exact meaning that it's meant to have in the movie, but it's used a lot, and it's very good. When the tornado comes through and they're yelling, "It's a twister!" Like I've heard that in lots of movies, people referencing it too. Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. Ding dong, the witch is dead, the ugly witch, the horrible witch. Ding dong, the wicked witch is dead. That's another thing I've seen in lots of movies. Obviously, the witch saying, "I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog too." Follow the yellow brick road. We're off to see the wizard. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. The flying monkeys. I've seen references to flying monkeys in lots of movies. I am Oz, the great and powerful. When the Wicked Witch says, "Fly, my pretties," and all of the winged monkeys fly around. Obviously, when she screams, "I'm melting, I'm melting," pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And then, obviously, the last one that they have is "There's no place like home," and clicking of the ruby slippers. These kinds of things are referenced in pop culture all of the time. It always happens. And there's no end in sight. And I don't think it's just because it's a popular thing to do. I think it's because this is one of the biggest and most influential and most memorable films to have ever been put to screen. And at the time, it maybe wasn't appreciated as much as it is today, because Gone with the Wind came out the same year, and Gone with the Wind swept the Academy Awards that year. It won all of the big prizes. Gone with the Wind is fine. I think it's a little bit boring, and it definitely has not stood the time the way The Wizard of Oz has. So my question out there to you is, did you like this kind of throwback movie review? Did you think it was good? Do you want to see more of this kind of stuff? Please feel free to let me know. You can reach out to me on social media. You can find me on Twitter at PottleNathan, and you can find the show on Instagram at Movies Are Awesome Podcast. If you have not done so, you can feel free to subscribe to the show. You can do so on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other places. I've got those links in the show notes down below. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It really means a lot to me. I hope you enjoyed this throwback review. I'm hoping to do more of these in the future. And if you have nothing else to do, go watch more movies.